Hi, I'm Callum Williams, Senior Business Journalist for Insider Sport, and I'm joined today with a very special guest. He's the founder, chairman, and co owner of one of the biggest mixed martial arts promotions in the world, the Professional Fighters League, as well as a seasoned sports investor and entrepreneur. Welcome, Donn Davis. So happy for you to take your time out of your busy morning today. So, how are you? Are you okay?
Doing great. Thanks for having me here, Cal.
Oh no, we appreciate it. We appreciate it. So, firstly, Don, there's PFL. It's coming up to its season start, should we say, with PFL 1, 2, 3, and 4 in Orlando, Florida. Could you just let us into some insight in what was the decision making behind the change in the PFL's format, and how eager are you to see not only for this to be simplified for the audience, but also to put on exciting fights?
Absolutely. For those who have followed PFL since the beginning, this is our seventh season. And PFL is always about win in advance. So the fighters are in control instead of the promoter being in control. If you win, you advance. If you lose, you go home. So think of it as March Madness, which starts this week, times MMA. And you win 3 times in a year, you win the championship, and you win a big bonus. So what we did differently this year is single elimination. In the past, there was a regular season, playoff, and championship. Fans said to us 2 things. One, we'd like it to be even easier to follow. And 2, we'd like the season to be even shorter. We did both. So the season has gone from 8 months to 5 months. So it starts in April, it ends in August. It is the most active, action-packed, exciting MMA 5 months you'll ever have, April to August. And second of all, single elimination. So now fighters don't have 2 chances. They got one, just one. And you win in the first round, you go to the semifinals. You win the semifinals, you go to the championship. It's just that simple.
Yeah, the single elimination aspect as well. I think that's something that's we can understand in England with the FA Cup and that legacy that's brought about. But also for MMA, it's so unique, right? And also you kind of PFL kind of came into the game with the $1 million prize fund as well for winning those competitions. So PFL have always, I believe, have innovated within the space as well. But can you also let us know, Don, about the residency in Orlando Studios this coming April? Is there a danger of any fighters missing out on building out their brand in their home regions, or was this more of a strategic plan to grow the PFL within Florida?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. We're always trying new things at the PFL. And the first thing is this year we have a total of 30 events. 2 years ago, we only had 15. So we're doubling the number of events. In order for us to double the number of events with high quality, we have to think, how are we going to execute those really well? We're now on 4 continents this year: Africa, Europe, Mideast, Australia, United States. So how are we going to execute all those events? So one thing we did is the first 4 events of the PFL World Tournament are in one location in Florida. That allows us to execute the TV global product with excellence and allows us to handle the fighter logistics much, much, much easier called for those first round fights. It's oftentimes you see, like in March Madness in basketball, they have a tournament happen in one place for a couple games. So the first 4 fights, all in Orlando, the first round. But after that, everywhere.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll touch on more of the global reach of the PFL later on. But I just wanted to take it a little bit back, Don. Drew what first drew your interest into MMA? As a knowledgeable sports investor and businessman, what attributes did the sport possess as a potential future investment? And then now, obviously, I believe that PFL is valued at close to $1 billion. Is that right?
Yes. So, I started the PFL the day UFC sold to Endeavor, and I'd done a lot in sports, media, and intellectual property on a global scale as an investor. Had done Sport Radar, DraftKings, Scopely, bought esports, Team Liquid. And I was quite impressed by 3 things the day that I read about the UFC. One, third largest fan base in the world. I had no idea, trailing only soccer and basketball. But number 2, the most underserved fan base. Think of soccer for a minute. There's 5,000 soccer matches, but there's only 50 major MMA events for all the MMA fans. And then the third thing is, it is just starting its evolution. MMA is only 30 years old. The next youngest sport, basketball, 75 years old. So I said I can come at this a different way, not compete with UFC, but give fans and fighters an alternative. And that is a fighter-driven promotion, where if they win, they advance. They're not under a promoter's control. So to me, I just looked at it as, call it an outsider. And there's a lot of things an outsider can look at things differently. What works, what doesn't work, what can be changed, what can be innovated. And I started the PFL that day. And since then we have become the number 2 by all measures, but we're not done. We think every single month, what can we do better?
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear as well that you're taking more of a sports approach. I mean, obviously, the league
Yeah.
is within that, and kind of moving away from the promotion aspect and us focusing more
Yes.
sports league. Um, But obviously, one of the major acquisitions you made was acquiring Bellator in late 2023. Was the goal to always merge both rosters under one roof? I know you had separate entities at the time, but now the acquisition has solidified and consolidated. How was that Bellator acquisition transpired over the just over a year now?
When we bought Bellator, we knew that there was a great fighter roster. We didn't know exactly what would be the best thing for the fans, how to take that fighter roster and put it into a product. Because ultimately, what you're doing is creating a fight product. PFL has different fight products now. The Champion Series, where champions go to fight, the World Tournament, and the International Regional Leagues. But how best to deploy those great additional Bellator fighters wasn't clear to us. But now we've done that, with the 3 products where you come up through the international leagues, you fight in the toughest test in the World Tournament. If you become a champion of World Tournament, a past champion of UFC, a past champion of PFL, a past champion of Bellator, you fight in the Champion Series. So for us, it's all about one roster, the best talent, but how to deploy that talent against different products. We now have that flexibility to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. I think also as well now that we're seeing also within the sports investment side of things is Saudi Arabia emerging as a global sports hub, whether it's hosting sporting events, investing in sporting events, and I know that SURJ Saudi Investments, they have also invested now in the PFL. Could you just let us into how that Saudi investment is able to not only grow the PFL within the Middle Eastern and Northern African regions, but also across globally as well?
Yeah, look, PFL is a global company. MMA is a global sport, so obviously we want to welcome all global investors to help us build. We already had the best United States investors, so 10 owners of major sports team leagues are investors in the PFL. We added Surge, which is PIF Sports. And most recently, we added a major Dubai investor. So what we are looking to do is if people want to make money in sports, the best global and growth sport is MMA. We want to welcome those into PFL. You can't invest anymore in the UFC. It's owned by somebody. So the only way to invest in the global and growth of MMA is PFL. We want to welcome all those people in, whether they're in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Australia, anywhere. And so what you'll see is continue to have investors join us, whether it's at the parent company or in our local regional leagues.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to leverage your venture capitalist cap on for a minute, Don. The Saudi Arabians are obviously really honed in now on this Saudi 2030 vision, with sport becoming a key
Mhm.
tourist and revenue driver for that sector, right? Is there any fear that European and North American investors may start to lag behind Saudi Arabia, and what more can they do to compete within the sport investment scene at the moment?
Wow, it's really great insight by you. Great question. I would
Thank you.
separate the world into, call it, big traditional sports and emerging growth sports. Where you see 95% of the dollars going right now is I call the big five, basketball, soccer, um, Premier League, NBA. So that's where when everybody talks sports investing in all these conferences, that's really what they're still talking about. They all say, I want global, I want growth. I want global, I want growth. I want global, I want growth. But they're not doing it, right? Because they're not really venture investors and they're not really company builders. They really want the big, mature, traditional assets. But that will change. That will change. Having been an investor for 35 years now, you see how investment patterns change. And people tend to go for global and growth second after they've gone for traditional assets first. So what I think the opportunity is for people, whether they're in North America or they're international, is to do the emerging sports that are global and growth. And most of our recent rounds of investment have come from outside the United States because they understand soccer and they know there's 8 soccer leagues that have built value. The Premier League is one, but there's 7 other sports leagues that they've invested in and built value. The United States is lagging behind because in the United States, to quote Highlander, there can only be one, right? And they think one NFL, one NBA, one MLB. So they never think there could be more than one big, valuable sports property in a segment. They're not right because they don't understand that these other segments are not natural monopolies and they're global. The NFL is a natural monopoly and it's domestic. The NBA is a natural monopoly, it's domestic. So that's true for those sports. But when you're talking about MMA or soccer, they're not natural monopolies and they're global. That's why there's more than one. So the people that start to understand the business dynamics underlying global and growth will benefit by making more money. And right now, those are international investors, not domestic investors.
Yeah, that's really interesting considering that obviously over here in the UK, football is our primary sport, and then obviously in 2021, the European Super League proposals came about, and they wanted to shut off and monopolize the sport, right? And I think obviously fans got fairly upset about that. But like you said there, I think that's what's interesting from the international aspect of investment is that there's so many football leagues and MMA as well. There's more MMA leagues as well, and yeah, that was just really interesting. I guess one of the traditional assets we you kind of dabble in is with boxing. I know Francis Ngannou has been in the boxing field recently. The Saudis have obviously partnered up with TKO Group. I'm just wondering what was your kind of thoughts on that move when TKO decided to partner with Saudi to create a new boxing promotion?
Yeah, I'll quote my 95-year-old dad, who I still talk to every day. He's very sharp. Every job is easy until it's yours. So I try to focus on building PFL and I try to focus on being an expert in MMA and what we're doing to build that business. Boxing, very different market, very different industry, very different athlete base with very different business dynamics. So I wish all entrepreneurs well, but I'm sticking to my MMA lane.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that. Boxing's very segmented and fragmented at the moment, so I would like to speak on the whole MMA boxer type of crossover sporting events that have happened. I mean, it kind of peaked with Mayweather McGregor. I mean, did it peak with Mayweather McGregor? But I know obviously now we've mentioned Francis Ngannou. He had a really good venture into boxing with fights against Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. Is there still demand there from key stakeholders? Do you believe for more crossover events to happen?
Yeah, I would broaden your question, call it crossover events, or call it um, cultural events,
Yeah,
cultural sports events. So Paul Tyson was just a cultural sports event, right? It's not sports at the highest level. Nobody
yeah,
thinks of that, right? Um, we're not trying to determine who's number one, in that fight. Same with Francis and Fury. Whoever comes out, it's not really number one, right, per se. These cultural events, I believe, will continue, but they will only continue with great, ones, and they will be fewer. So think of it as fewer and great, not more and worse, because more and worse is kind of a sideshow, kind of a circus. But great ones like Tyson, Paul, even if it's not excellent competition, is a cultural event that everybody likes to watch. And so I think, for example, as it relates to us, I think it's interesting for Francis Ngannou. I'd love to see Francis take on Joshua or Deontay Wilder in a mixed rules fight. That's never been done. Never been done. Like, we've never seen a mixed rules fight between somebody who's a pretty good boxer and a pretty good MMA, or pretty good on the ground and pretty good on the feet. We'd love to put something like that together because that would be culturally relevant. Those are hard to do, right? Because you've got the athletes who are the best in the world. You've got a lot of money involved. You got very complicated schedules. But I think, you can see 2 or 3 of these a year that will be great. And I think that'll continue.
yeah. They're very real entertainment drivers, I suppose, of the traditionalist aspects of sports that we all love to see. Um, Don, I'm just going to try and put on your investor hat again and pick your brain a little bit. What are your thoughts on the current broadcast rights market at the moment? I mean, it seems like rights are just becoming more and more valuable. They're becoming more and more expensive, and obviously now we have the introduction of streaming platforms. Has the introduction of streaming services solely increased the valuations of broadcast rights, or are there other facets involved in this?
Yeah, look, I think there's three things that you'll see in the future that people aren't talking about a lot. Obviously, everybody's talking about how big the rights packages are. Just the quantum. The tens of billions for the overall and the single billions per year. But I think there's three things that are under talked about that will happen. I don't know which property and which year, but the dynamics of the business market are certain these will happen. One is people will take global packages. Amazon, Netflix, Apple, eventually ESPN. Those four are global streaming platforms. Naturally, they would want to have global streaming rights. You don't want to turn on and turn off properties. So how do you have 190 countries of which you have rights? So if you could market a property worldwide, that's very, very valuable. Now, most properties have not synced up their rights to offer them to those four companies. But you will see those four companies increasingly say, I want global rights. And when I can get them, that's premium value for a global property. Second trend you'll see is most sports divisions of these companies don't make much money, but their entertainment divisions make more money. The difference is their entertainment divisions own about 50% of the intellectual property that they distribute. So they're both content owners and distributors. They don't own any sports IP. They continually rent and then pay higher next time they rent. Rent, pay higher next time they rent. That's an insane cycle. So if I were any of these big companies, I would say, how do I own some sports intellectual property? So the asset that I am building on my platform, I participate in some of that building. So for example, when Fox first broadcast UFC was worth $500 million. Fox built it to $4 billion. When ESPN first broadcast UFC, $4 billion, it's now $20 billion. So Fox and ESPN built UFC. They don't own any of it. That's insane. So I think you will start to see big, smart companies say, I want to own some intellectual property. And then the last thing I think you'll see is some movement to emerging sports. So MMA, for example, the data we have shows that MMA is the second best performing sport on streaming per dollar. Second best per dollar. So you see all these people chasing the NBA, but the second best performing sport on your streaming platform, which is your future, is MMA. But you don't see discussions of 8 companies tripping over themselves for the UFC package or 2 years later, the PFL package. But that's the data. But since most executives don't understand MMA and they didn't grow up loving MMA and they don't go see MMA, they don't trip over it. But you're going to start to see number 3, the more you look at performance and the more you look at who's 18 to 35 and the lifetime value of those customers, not the 60-year-old, not the 55-year-old lifetime value, which is half of the 18 to 35, they're going to start to bet on more emerging sports. So those 3 trends are absolutely factually true. Which companies will move, which properties, and how, we don't know. But that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's fascinating insight, especially when now I think what you alluded to there, the NBA, they're very, very digital engagement orientated, because I know that the traditional cable numbers, right, for viewership for the NBA has been declining, but their digital engagement is through the roof, right? So I guess there's going to be a lot more focus. I mean, with the PFO as well, I'm sure your social media and digital content strategies, right?
Of course, you have to think of viewership holistically, right? And it's not just linear and streaming. It's also digital, mobile. It's not just United States, it's global. It's not just the live event, it's the re-airs. Remember, our re-airs are 25% of our original audience. Well, what others? I'm a huge Cincinnati Bengals fan. I've never rewatched in 50 years a Bengals game again. And I never miss a live one. That's not what NFL fans do. But fight fans, they'll rewatch fights. So it's very interesting as you start to think viewership holistically, 360. The world's different.
Yeah. Yeah, we're kinda like that with the football over in the UK. We don't really go back and watch full football games. You watch it live
Nobody
or you watch the
does.
highlights.
That's
Yeah.
right. It's only fight fans that will do this.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly agree as well, being a fan of the sport myself. Lastly, Don, thank you so much for your time. I won't keep you around for much longer. You've also highlighted soccer, football for our UK audience as one of the most emerging sports within the US specifically. And I think I've also heard you mention that the MLS, well, soccer in general, and MMA will start to overtake the MLB and the NHL as one of the four big sports over there in the US. Do you have a timeline on when you believe this will occur and how much of a lucrative investment the US soccer can be in the future? Obviously, now with the World Cup right around the corner next year.
Yeah, to me, it's much more clear of the outcome than time frame. When I was at AOL 28 years ago, right? Only 1% of the spending was digital. 1% of the spending. And people were still doing Time magazine. It's 28 years ago. You think I'd be talking about my great, great, great grandfather when I say something like that. But that was like my career when I'm 32 years old. So to me, what people forget is things will always be bigger than you think, but they will take a little bit longer than you think. Bigger, but take longer. So it is a certainty that MMA and soccer will be bigger than baseball and hockey because the fan bases are already there. So it's a certainty. Okay. And they're all global. Okay. And they're all young.
Yeah,
So those
especially.
three facts are true. So therefore, the commercialization is lagging. Okay. And the distributors' embracement is lagging. Okay, well, those will change. So that's why I couldn't give you a time frame because it requires on the ecosystem and the mentality moving. Okay. So those take a little bit while, but things will be bigger than you expect, but they'll take a little longer than you expect. But it's absolutely factual because of the existing fan base, the existing global platform, and the youth of soccer and MMA that they will replace baseball and replace hockey as the big four on a global basis, 100%.
Yeah, that's going to be really, really interesting to see. Well, Don, I think I'll leave you with what can fight fans and PFL fans expect this year. Obviously, now with the new format, like we've explained, also the Champion Series as well. Could you just let us know what the PFL fans can expect for this year moving forward?
I'll leave you guys with three quick things. One, this world tournament's going to be unbelievable. I mean, the excitement and desperation we're going to see every 15 minutes when it's single elimination, 3 rounds of 5 minutes is incredible. And the roster this year is the best we've ever had in the world tournament. 1/3 of that roster is ranked in the top 35 of the world. Oh, that is the toughest test in MMA, just got tougher. So one, watch the world tournament coming April 3rd. Second, we are going to fight fans in the world that are underserved or ignored by UFC. So 2/3 of our events are outside the United States. So as I said, we're on 5 continents this year. And the launch of PFL Africa, the launch of PFL Australia, and the building of PFL Mideast and PFL Europe continues. So right now we're a co-leader in Europe. We're selling out the Accor Arena. We're doing 2 million viewers in France. So we take the fight to the fans, their own local heroes, all those events, prime time, all locally in those continents. So go see them, if you're there. And then finally, number 3, we'll launch the Champion Series in July. And those will be one-off events, the best of the best, where champions go to fight. We've never had this product before. We'll only do 4 a year. So think of them as the reimagining of our super fights, where champions go to fight, and we'll have 4 this year. So those are the 3 products, and I think they're all true to who we are, but better and reimagined a little bit this year. So
Yeah,
tune in.
it's been really interesting to see the PFL's growth over the past couple of years, Don. But thank you so much for taking your time out, and all the best for the rest of the year. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Cal.